Welcome to Morning Blend Business on this Wednesday, May 28th, 2025. Welcome back to our Morning Blend listeners. Once again, I'm Dwight Strawn along with Laverne Gardner on this Wednesday. And this morning, it is time for a monthly series with NIB. Today, we're talking about occupational health and safety and the Occupational Health and Safety Unit. We are very pleased to have with us a full studio. We've got Nurse Kanika Wood, the Assistant Manager of Medical Supplies. What am I reading? Medical Appeals. Right. Medical Appeals. Okay, I'm sorry there. And Nurse Kristen Johnson, Assistant Manager of the Occupational Health and Safety Unit. You're the Nurse Case Manager. And we have with us via Zoom, we've got Nurse Shaki Miller, the manager representing the Northern Bahamas operations. Right. Got everybody? Okay, welcome. Great to have you all with us.
Thank you.
All right, so let's begin at the very beginning, the Occupational Health and Safety Unit. Tell us exactly what this is all about and what you all are overseeing, what you do there.
Well, the Occupational Health and Safety Unit is a unit that was established by the National Insurance Board to provide the industrial benefit for our workers in the country. The percentages that are taken out of your salary for the industrial benefit includes a medical insurance that we provide and manage through Occupational Health and Safety. Mm-hmm. So if one has an industrial accident, it is funded and managed through Occupational Health and Safety, and our office is located on Carmichael Road.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's define that industrial accident. What does that entail exactly? Get a little bit closer to the mic, Nurse Johnson. Mm-hmm.
Sorry about that. We'll use an example. Basically, it's just an accident that occurs or arises in or out of the course of your duty, and let's say a butcher cutting meat for a patron in a food store, and they would have accidentally cut their hand on the machine, etc. Mm-hmm. Or a construction worker who would have, working on a roof or a ladder, suffered a slip and fall off that ladder and would have injured themselves.
Yeah, okay, so again, it has to be on your, in the line of...
In or out of the course of their duties.
So me falling down in the supermarket, if I don't work there, that would not count as that. No.
If you don't work there, you're not covered.
Right.
So what happens with the National Insurance Board, we actually have a contract between employees and the employer. Mm-hmm. So we have a B60 form, a B44 form, B72 form. Once the B60 form and the B44 form are completed, these forms are the contracts between NIB and the employer that states that the employee is employed by the employer. Mm-hmm. And that's the contract between NIB and that employer. Mm-hmm. So that guarantees that that claimant gets 100% medical care and medical coverage under the Industrial Act.
Yeah. So how far does this go? I mean, can you claim, well, as a writer, I'm typing, I get a carpal tunnel or something. Can that count?
Case by case basis.
Say that into the mic.
They're really case by case basis, to be honest. Mm-hmm. There are things that we do review. Yes, we do review the official accident report, which is the B44 that comes in. And just based on that and the information gathered, and sometimes even the medical records, make a determination. Okay.
Laverne, you were going to ask something?
I wanted to know how long does this process take if someone is injured on the job? Let's say, well, first of all, I wanted to know, let's say I'm returning for lunch and I'm walking up the stairs and I slip on the steps. Would that be considered an industrial action? Accident, sorry.
So not in the supermarket, but at your workplace, you slip and fall.
Good morning.
Morning.
Okay.
Good morning, Nurse Ashaki.
Good morning, Nurse Miller here. Yes, the scenario that Ms. Gardner just presented, that would be considered an industrial accident because we consider access to and egress from. And so that means you're returning from lunch. Even though you're returning from lunch, you have to utilize that staircase to get back.
Okay.
And so then if something in nature.
Thank you. And if something like that happens, then what would be the process for me? What would I need to do?
Okay, so we always try to encourage claimants to report immediately. So if you had a slip and fall while you're accessing the stairway, tell someone, a coworker, a manager, the person that you directly report to, tell somebody so that they can make note of what has happened, or your version of what has happened, okay? And so what we require is that you report your incident to someone on the premises, whoever the designated person is. Different companies have HR personnel who are responsible for completing these forms. And so you would report to that particular person, give your details as to what happens. And so, like Nurse Wood would have referenced, the first form that they would complete for you if you require services via an emergency room or a clinic, they will complete the B60 form. And so that form is completed in duplicate. And so, not duplicate, triplicate, as a matter of fact, because your employer keeps one. You are sent to the ER or the clinic with a copy, Occupational Health and Safety of the National Insurance Board. And so that B60 is only utilized for 72 hours. That means you can use that once within 72 hours. Afterwards, we need to have the form that it's called the B44 form. That's the employer's report of what has happened, an accident that would have taken place on their premises. We need to have that form in afterwards.
Okay. If you are doing surveys for the company and you're out in the field and you are at somebody's house and you slip and you fall or you get injured there, that is considered okay.
Once you're within the course of your duty.
Okay.
If it's in your job description and you've been assigned to do it, it's within the course of your duty, and that's considered a work accident.
Yeah, heading to that assignment, that as well.
You were,
all
were
of
dispatched.
that. Yeah. Okay. All right. So tell us a little more about the process. We heard Nurse Miller say some of it, but what else do people need to keep in mind with this? She mentioned that you have to tell somebody at work, but can you ever not involve a doctor, nurse, hospital? Can you say, I'm just going to be at home, but I want you to know that this happened to me?
Well, most employers, all employers require that you, after you would have had the industrial accident, if you require medical attention, that is when the medical field would be involved.
Right.
And then you would go to a medical facility with the B60, as Nurse Miller would have said. Once you go with the B60, the B44 must then come into our office so that accident is registered. Once the accident is registered, approval is gained through our managers at our Occupational Health and Safety Department, and then you're at liberty to seek medical attention, further medical attention.
Yeah.
With our process, we have a pre-approval process, and we give medical care at 100% coverage for 40 weeks. The Act and regulations state that care is given for 40 weeks. It's up to 40 weeks, so you don't necessarily have to be off for that amount of time, but you're eligible to get care for.
Right. Break that down for some more about what the employer will be responsible for and what NIB will be responsible for.
If a claimant is hospitalized, if a claimant has to have a surgery, if you have to have medications, also when you see the physician gives you a form called a Med 1. You may be familiar with it. Once you get a sick slip, the Med 1 form is given to you. Your employer gives the Med 1 a twin, which is a Med 4. Both of these forms go in, and you're compensated 66 2/3 of your salary of the insurable wage with that Med 1 and Med 4 form.
Yeah.
And that's up to 40 weeks.
Yeah.
At the end of the 40th week, you go for something what we call a disablement assessment. This disablement assessment is done to see the impact of the injury on your life. Our job as case managers or nurses is to guide your care under the direction of our medical officer, and the care is guided to try and get you back to where you was before your accident.
Okay.
So we want you to be, if not better, the same as you were, close to
Yeah.
where you were prior to your accident.
Wow. Okay, so now, based on what you're saying, Nurse Wood, I'm thinking mental health issues. If you have an episode as a result of workload or stress, is that covered in any way? If you are driven to a heart attack or a stroke, does that what happens there? Is the onus on you proving that this is work stress that caused this, or how would you handle that? Anyone can jump in on that one.
I mean, again, that is on a case-by-case basis. We'll say that much.
Has it happened? Have people come forward and say this job caused me to nearly die? Mentally?
That would be everyone. I would say so too. We've had cases.
Oh boy.
We've had cases of people who've been attacked or robberies, and they have had post-traumatic stress disorder, and we have given treatment for that for 40 weeks or less.
Oh wow. Okay.
So, as Nurse Johnson would have stated, you are treated based on a case-by-case basis. And as any medical treatment is given, it's unique to you. But the benefit is there. And we have a medical officer, Dr. Gertrude Holder, and we have a deputy medical officer, Dr. Valron Grimes. They speak on behalf of the director, Dr. Tammy Francis, and they are there to make decisions to help the Bahamian public to get medical care based under the industrial benefit.
That is excellent. That is excellent.
What happens in the case, or does it even impact your claim if you're still within that 40 weeks?
You're kind of muffled, Laverne. I'm not sure what changed.
I don't know. Hello, can you hear me?
It's a little bit better.
What happens if you are no longer with the company? Let's say you resign. You've already started the process, put in the claim. Nothing to do with the injury, but you've resigned from that company that you were working for when you got injured. Does that impact your claim? Does that impact your treatment?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't, because once you've been approved for an industrial accident, like Nurse Wood would have mentioned, you're entitled to that medical care, whether you need it or not, for 40 weeks. And so you may have been injured on one job, and as a result, you resign or you were dismissed. You're still entitled to your medical. Now, it may affect the payment of your IIBs. These are the Med 1 forms. And so once because of course, a Med 4 form has to come from the employer. So if you're no longer employed with that company, of course, you cannot expect that employer to continue to produce Med 4 forms for you. And so what we would require of you is that you would, if you can get a letter, if you resign, like you gave the scenario where you resign, you can get a letter from that employer stating that you would have resigned. And so they would write a letter into us. And of course, we will utilize that. It's something like our B80s when persons are applying for unemployment benefits. And so we can utilize that letter that goes along with your Med 1 form to continue to pay you, okay? Up until a certain period.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. We've got a few questions coming in on our text line, and the phone lines are beginning to light up as well. You can call us if you have any questions. 323-6232, 325-4316, 325-4259. Call us toll free, 242-300-5720. We're talking with Nurse Wood, Nurse Johnson, Nurse Miller with the Occupation Health and Safety Unit with NIB. Let's go to the phone lines. Caller, good morning. You are on. Doing well.
Yes. What I want to know, because
Turn on the radio for us, please. We were hearing a little feedback there.
Yes, sir. How you doing? More than once again.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess I had an industrial accident twice for this year working in the hotel because I'm working in the engineering department. I just went back to work last week, Saturday. I had a few stitches in my hand. But what I realized for me I get hurt on the job twice. It's the process is so long. It's so frustrated. Like it's like I pray God that I would not get hurt on the job no more. And a lot of people who I know who get hurt, they some of them get hurt on the job and they don't even report it because the process and everything and all that, and then what you getting back from NHI because they say the employer pays 33% and national insurance pays 66%. Now when I got hurt the last time, I wait my check take almost a few months to just only collect $78. I mean, and I get hurt in the job, I get my fingers split open. So it's like the benefit and what you getting back. Because if you making a certain money every week or every 2 weeks, I think you're supposed to be able. If you get hired on demand job, it's someone's job, you're supposed to be either get a little more or you're supposed to collect the same amount of pay which you if you was on the job working for the 2 weeks. And it's supposed to collect your money. I mean, and I know a lot of people can call on this. It is frustrating. I pray God not to get hurt on the job no more.
Okay, all right. Let's get them to respond. I knew that she was not going to be in here and not want to talk. But we have the Assistant Manager of Public Relations with NIB, Rutina Basden, with us as well. Good to have you with us.
Thank you for having us.
All right, so he said NHI. You shook your head, of course. It's
Right.
not that.
So I know it's a common misconception, NIB, NHI. So we're two very distinctive statutory entities, right? So the National Insurance Board provides partial income replacement. That's the first thing I want to stress. It's partial. In no instance can we provide your full salary when you're out of work, whether it's temporary or permanent, for example, at the end of your work life, like say retirement or invalidity. You know, I do empathize with the caller. I won't speak to anything medical related because I don't have those credentials behind me. I'll allow the nurse case managers to address that.
Right.
But the one thing I wanted to point out is when you apply for a benefit, whether it's injury benefit under the industrial benefits branch because you had an accident that arose out of or in the course of your duties, or sickness benefit or maternity, those benefits are based on the contributions paid by you as a result of your insurable. So, for example, you may earn $5,000 a month, but you don't pay contributions on that amount. You pay up to the insurable wage. That amount has
$35.10.
increased to $35.10 as of July 1st last year. So what that means is I may make $6,000, right? I'm speaking it, right? But I only pay contributions on the $35.10, not $1 more.
Wow.
Your benefits, say for example, the injury benefit, is paid as a percentage of your insurable wage that you pay contributions on. So you, if you're out of work and you pay contributions monthly or your employer remits it monthly on your behalf, you get that injury benefit at 66 2/3% of the $35.10, not your $6,000 salary.
Wow.
Right? So you won't get 66 2/3% of $6,000 if you're earning that amount. You'll get it up to whatever it is that you're paying contributions on at a maximum of that ceiling.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's 6 2/3% of that. Now, I did note, and I do empathize with the caller, that sometimes the process can take a little while. We understand that. But I do note that he pointed out finger was split.
Yeah, I think that's what he said.
Something like that. So I'll allow the nurse case managers to talk to that, to address that as well as their processes.
Yeah.
Caller, I am sorry for any delays that you would have had during the process, but the process has been fine-tuned a lot in recent years. We have increased the amount of case managers that we have in our occupational health and safety department. At one point, we had about
I think we just lost your mic there to see if we can get that back up there. Yep. Are we good? Okay, continue.
Okay. At one point, we had about 5 case managers. That was the complement. The complement is now 7 in the Bahamas, 2 in Grand Bahama. So the complement of case managers has changed. So care, we used to say we had a turnaround time of 5 days. You can get care in 1 day. Once all of your ducks are in a row, meaning your employer has put in the contract, the B-44, and that has been approved. If it is completed properly, witness statements, everything attached to it is attached, that accident can be approved almost right away.
Yeah.
Once that comes in, pre-approval is sought out from any medical facility, whether it's public or private, and care is given.
Yeah. So is the onus, or should it be on the employers here to do their part and not to hold back?
Absolutely.
Explain why that keeps
So-
happening. What can be done about that?
So from a customer service standpoint, Nurse Wood said something very valuable. We're obviously guided by what the employer puts on that B44 form. So to simplify that, that's the employer's report on an accident that happens at work. So it tells us everything from where the accident happened, what time, who witnessed it, what happened. There's even a bodily diagram, so you can circle he injured his wrist or whatever, right? So it lets NIB know all the details surrounding that industrial accident that happened. I can't speak to how common it is, but it does happen where a form is sent in incomplete because maybe you don't realize the importance of that question, you don't think it's important, maybe you overlook it just trying to get it in, and that's just not for the B44 form. That's for any form that an employer or a claimant has to submit to NIB. The question is not answered. We have to get back to that claimant or the employer to get this question answered because that helps us to adjudicate claims, to work them, and to get the necessary benefits, assistance, or whoever requires.
Right.
That takes a little bit of time too. So we do want to emphasize when you are sending in these forms, just answer all the questions. They're there for a reason. Sign them, date them where applicable. You do want to stamp the form as the employer. And I also want to mention, by law, it is mandatory that every employer that has 10 or more employees keep an accident logbook on their premises. People don't realize it. But I may have an accident today and I get back up and I'm fine. But a couple weeks later, a couple years later, whatever the case may be, I start to have some sort of issues because of that accident. So you do need to keep that accident log, making note of who or the employee is that it happened to, when, where, who witnessed it, what they may have been doing. If you want more guidance on that, reach out to our inspectorate department or our occupational health and safety unit. But you do want to keep that accident logbook on premises at all times.
And so the employees need, whether nobody was around or not,
Go report
you
it.
need to say something. I did hit my head here. I did fall here.
Report it.
Okay. Yeah.
There is
There's
a, there's
And
a,
can I piggyback on something that
go ahead,
Nurse
Ms.
would have
Jackie.
mentioned?
Yes, Nurse Miller.
Ms. Baston said something very valuable because the onus is on the employers, once an accident is reported, to ensure that that form, that B44 form, comes in a timely manner. We actually have a cutoff point. After 1 month, a B44 is considered late. That doesn't mean that the accident can't be approved, but it does mean that the employer can be fined $500. And so to employers, because we know that behind every B44 form, there's an injured person. And so we want those forms to come in time so that we can provide medical care in a timely manner, because an acute injury is easier to treat than a chronic one. Additionally, as Nurse Wood would have mentioned, we started out with 5. We actually started out with 2 medical case managers for the entire Bahamas.
Oh my goodness.
So we have, yes, I have seen the evolution case management, because I've been here with the board for about 12 years now. And so, like I said, we started off with 2 case managers, then we came up to 4, then it came up to 5, and now, like she said, we've got about 8 of us now, 2 in Northern Bahamas and 6 in Nassau. And so care we're able to get out care faster than we used to do in the past. But we really need the employers to work along with us to ensure that those forms come in a timely manner.
Correct.
Yeah. Wow.
We,
Okay. Nurse Wood.
Currently, we have a high energy, efficient customer service department. It's manned by Mr. Shane Albury. Lots of people know Mr. Shane, the whole manager of the whole Carmichael Road. Everyone looks at Shane as Mr. NIB. So Mr. Albury is the manager of our customer service department, and he's fully staffed, and these guys will get on the phone and call the employer, get those forms in, get those witness reports in, and they're working.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of claimants that will come in and they would say, oh, I was waiting for this, or I was waiting for that. You can come into our Carmichael Road department, our Carmichael Road customer service department. They can help to answer questions that you need answered.
Okay.
The nurse case manager serves as the mediator and the advocate between NIB and the employer.
Correct.
Okay. Excellent. Mm-hmm.
And you know what, even if, you don't want the instance where an employer doesn't want to furnish some document required by them, right? So even as it relates to the Med 1 form for sickness or injury benefit, et cetera, by law, it is now an offense for an employer not to furnish that document. So if we are made aware that the employer does not want to provide that for us in the event that an employee is entitled to sickness benefit, injury benefit, maternity benefit. That's now prosecutable. But obviously, we don't want to, take it to that level. We just want employers to know that you have to furnish that document to us.
Are you seeing compliance, or are they? How is that looking? Oh boy, long pauses.
In most instances,
Yeah.
and most of the entities that the employees would come in from, they are well versed in the industrial process. The medical facilities that would accept B44s and B60s and any document regarding the industrial benefit, they know that we pay based on what is reasonable and customary. So it's ahead of where we were years ago. So now we're accepted all over the Bahamas, and if the care is not available in the Bahamas, we are also accepted outside as well.
Okay, we've got a lot more calls and a lot of text messages. Let's see how many of these we can get in. Caller, good morning. You're on the air. Are you there? Good morning, caller. You're live on the air. Hi. Yes. Good morning. Okay, call us back. 323-6232, 325-4316, 325-4259. Good morning. You're live.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Strawn.
Hi.
And good morning to your guests. This is a very needed conversation for people like me who are up in age. I'm 60, right? I had an industrial accident in the year 2000. And the lady said something that stood out for me in the fact that she's saying a subsequent revelation of an injury. Now, I had went before. I like to say that I was I was handsomely rewarded. I don't know what happened to the general, those little figures, but I got some good money from National Insurance. But the problem was that I think they had made a stipulation where industrial accidents after 10 years, I think, is null and void or whatever, or you will have to write a letter to National Insurance. I don't know which area it is, but you're supposed to write a letter for Now, what happened is this accident happened in the church. I don't know who was cursed, me or the church. But the employer, that's just a little joke though. But the employer, I want to get this thing because I really have to visit them. The employer, for me right now, looking back at retrospect, I realized that they were negligent in the fact that, well, I was working on an Ocean Club Estates running wires, but they took me and they carried me to install this in AC. And what happened is if they had really did due diligence on the area that I was working in, this accident would have never happened. But nobody told me that this ceiling was actually sheetrock or whatever. It was bubbles. It looked like concrete, but it actually opened up on me as I was working in the ceiling, connecting the thermostat or whatever. And so I saw daylight and I came to the ceiling and I was actually hurt. I was hurt bad. I wouldn't even talk about the cuts and bruises, but I eventually landed on my buttocks. So it jolted my spine and my pelvis. And so when I went to the doctor, National Insurance had sent me to the doctor, and then they did this X-rays and all that, and then we went before this panel to determine incapacitation, and then they said that he's 10% incapacitated, and but the doctor told me that when I reached a certain age, I would experience this problem of osteoarthritis or whatever. Oh, wow. But it bothers me up to this day, and so I wrote a letter for extended medical benefits. Nothing has happened, and so I was wondering, is there any way for you? Time has passed. Why couldn't I have sued the employer for negligence? Because that's exactly what it was. There was no lighting, and they didn't facilitate anything, and I wasn't warned that this area was unsafe. Just hang up and listen.
Okay. All right.
Okay, Mr. Caller. I am so sorry to hear about your accident. I'm happy that you mentioned everything that would have happened, because he did mention that he got care and he went out for assessment. His assessment was 10%, and that leads me into the disablement assessment. So because his assessment was only 10%, his care couldn't continue beyond the 40th week. If his assessment was greater than 25%, then his care could have continued up to 2 years, which is not something that's mandatory.
Right.
It's something that happens based on the assessment. If it's greater than 25%, you can get care up to 2 years.
What's the max you can get?
Only 2 years.
Oh, okay.
After that time, you would go before multiple boards to get more care if needed.
Okay.
But I'm known for speaking to this term of the industrial benefit and our medical insurance being an interim insurance, meaning this is not major medical insurance. This is nothing that can be sustained over your lifespan. And as he would have been told, his injury would have eventually degenerated or it would have become chronic,
Yeah.
which it did. We wouldn't chronic injuries because of the percentage of NIB that is taken out of your salary. Major medical insurance could cost up to 25% of your salary. The board, the Bahamas, wouldn't be able to sustain giving care to each individual with an industrial accident for their whole lifespan.
Wow.
This is why you are awarded a disablement assessment. And that medical referee at that time of that assessment will determine how your injury has hindered your life.
You said a lot of very powerful things there. People need to keep that in mind. Not
And the
major medical.
caller also
Nurse Miller?
mentioned yes, the caller also mentioned something about care being up to 10 years. That's incorrect. Like Nurse Woodruff said, you're entitled to 40 weeks of care. If the DBL assessment comes back at 25% or higher, you can go up to 2 years. You can go beyond 2 years, but you would have to be presented to it before a committee called the Industrial Accident Committee. And this is where we have the medical officer. We've got, acting on behalf of the director, of course, we've got our legal officer. We got persons from Central Benefits, and we have the case manager who will present the case before that committee. And that committee will determine how many years or months they would extend your care. Okay, and so we've had cases where we have had claimants who had sustained industrial accidents. They go up to 4 years or beyond that. It's all determined by whether your care has been approved for continued care over 2 years.
Yeah.
And of course, we want to make mention that if NIB makes a ruling or decision on it disagrees with the decision NIB made, you do have the right by law to appeal. I'll let Nurse Wood speak to the medical appeals process and how that looks. But once we notify you in writing of what NIB's decision is, you have 21 days to write back to us, letting us know you disagree with the decision, you request an appeal hearing, and you are allowed to present whatever evidence you have to support your opinion.
Okay. All right. Tell us about that, Nurse Wood, the appeals process.
So the medical appeals process is facilitated by the medical officer or deputy director of the board. A committee or a panel of medical physicians who are independent of NIB are chosen or selected to chair this committee. Once the claimant is brought in, legal officer from NIB and any legal or medical representation from NIB would come in and state what NIB has done for the claimant. So any claim that the claimant would come in with, if they have a medical injury that NIB has chosen not to cover, they're able to present their case and they're able to present why they feel it should be covered by NIB. It's heard before this board, and the board will determine if NIB has met its obligation to that claimant or if the claimant requires something from NIB.
Wow.
But that medical panel is totally independent of NIB, and they are allowed to make that decision and tell NIB what is required of them.
Wow. Okay.
So there are
All right.
checks and balances
Yeah.
to this, right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
All right, we got only a couple minutes left, and we've got a few messages here. Let's see how quickly we can get through these. This person says, I've been submitting the required contribution forms and payment confirmations to this email address, contributions@nib-bahamas.com. But I consistently request a confirmation of receipt. However, I never get a response. Is this the correct email address for such submissions? If not, which is the right one? Is that right?
It sounds familiar. I
Yeah.
will double check because I don't have all, the email addresses memorized. If I could get that contact for that
Okay.
person, I will look into it and respond.
Yeah. As an employer, I'd like to know whether online access is now fully available, or is it still in the beta testing phase?
Online access, meaning online services.
For the app.
So we do have certain services that are available through our website through certain applications. So you can renew your NIB card through our Easy Renew application. Of course, that's for select category of users, but we do have a FAQ sheet for commonly asked questions, and it's very easy to maneuver through. Of course, you can also reach out to our customer service department. We do have the employer self-service portal, ideally for our larger employers so that they can submit their contribution statements, they can make payment through that portal, manage their employee roster. What does that mean? Add new employees, remove them if they resign or they leave for whatever reason. We have the mobile app the C10 mobile app that does the same thing as the ESS portal, but that's for employers with 10 or fewer employees and self-employed persons. It does the same thing. You pay your contributions, you submit the contribution statement, you make payment through that app. There's no third-party person who has to post this information or anything like that. You take control of that. And then, of course, our registrant self-service portal, where you can monitor your contributions yourself anytime, anywhere. And we want to tell persons, monitor your contributions. Don't wait till it's time to make up. It's not there. Come and tell us if anything is missing or incorrect. So when you do make application for a benefit of any sort, we're ready to calculate that and go.
So those apps are available. It's the RSS app and then the ESS app. And our website is www.nib-bahamas.com. More information can be found on the website, and both of the apps are live.
Right.
Yeah. This text sounds like something we should have asked at the beginning of the show. Oh boy. If you are self-employed and you get injured, what do you do? What happens there?
The self-employed process is a bit different.
Yeah.
Because the self-employed person is not allowed to use a B60. That particular accident requires approval, and that particular accident is the accident that requires contribution status review.
So what that means is, unlike an employee, it doesn't matter if my employer is not up to date with my contributions, because I don't pay that myself.
Right.
The onus is on the self-employed person to stay up to date with their contribution, forfeit their right to any industrial benefits or services that NIB provides. Specifically, you want to make sure you are not more than 60 days in arrears, i.e. 2 months. So stay well within that 2-month grace period of being in arrears. So you want to make sure your contributions are up to date. So that is one stipulation, tongue tie, that they want to make sure that they're keeping in mind at all times.
Yeah.
And you cannot make the contributions up to date after the accident, because all of those dates are reviewed.
Wow. I think this texter, we basically talked about this already, but they're saying something happens, you take sick leave, but event to an amputation or something like that. They're talking about the benefits there. But if the injury happened years ago and later it leads to something catastrophic like that, do your benefits increase after the amputation, or is there an adjustment? Is there a change after that point?
The acuteness and the chronicity all have to be taken into consideration. We have a lot of claimants in the Bahamas who would have what we call chronic illnesses. So if your chronic illnesses or your comorbidity has to be taken into consideration when you go in for a disablement assessment. So if you're a diabetic per se and you cut your toe at work, we give acute. If you haven't been taking care of your diabetes and your toe is cut off, it may lead to something that's now chronic. You may have a chronic foot disease at that point. The industrial accident, or is that because of your non-compliance? So all of that is to be taken into consideration, and all of that is reviewed. That is why we have a medical officer who is an actual family medicine physician. She's a doctor, and she reviews all cases that are complex, and as Nurse Johnson states, all cases.
Case-by-case basis.
Yeah. They're seen at a case-by-case basis.
Yeah. Wow.
And additionally, one more thing, please. Additionally, once your DBL would have been final at a certain percentage, you don't get to go back and say, oh, I've lost, unfortunately, a limb due to XYZ as a result of this industrial accident. And so once it's final, it's final.
Right. Unless, of course, that claim
So
is...
if you, unless you are trying to appeal. But if you didn't appeal that process within a stipulated time frame, and say for example, you got a final percentage of 20%. You didn't appeal it within 21 days, or even beyond the 21 days, because sometimes we give a grace period, and you find 2 years later as a result of this industrial accident, you cannot return now to the board trying to get that percentage changed to something higher or different.
Okay. All right. The Stashers, thank you. I think they're thanking you for letting people know about the medical appeals process. They had no idea this was a thing. So thank you for that. Ladies, thank you for being with us this morning. This is great education for everybody, I'm sure. Nurse Kanika Wood, Nurse Kristen Johnson, Nurse Ashaki Miller, and Rudina Basden. Thank you so much
Thank you
for being
for
with us
having
this
us.
morning. And we'll see you next month.
Absolutely.
Here on Morning Blend Business. Laverne Gardner, thank you so much for being here on a Wednesday. I'll see you next week. Next week, Thursday. Everybody have a great day. Be sure to pick up today's Nassau Guardian for the Guardian business section for the ladies and business users of the country. This portion of the show brought to you by CFAL, growing wealth for future generations. On clock with Aaron Green, plus live coverage of the budget communication. Prime Minister Davis in the House of Assembly this morning. All of that right here on Guardian Radio. Have a great day, everybody.